Welcome everybody to using SBOMs for Linux Foundation projects. I'm Jeff Shapiro from the Linux Foundation. This is Gary O'Neill from Source Auditor. Gary and I have been friends and colleagues for many years now, so it's always a pleasure to present with Gary. And we've been working on this project for quite a while now. Everybody's heard a lot about SBOMs, and for some time now, we've been generating SBOMs for Linux Foundation projects. So some of you may have heard us talk about this at the Member Summit, if you attended, or maybe other things related to SBOMs last year at Open Source Summit. We do license scanning and auditing of Linux Foundation projects for a very important reason. As you may know, Linux Foundation hosts about 1,200 or more open source projects. So that's a lot. We don't scan all of them, but we scan many of them, several hundred of them. And the reason we do that is to do the due diligence for license compliance so that when the community, enterprises, individuals, academic organizations, anyone uses our code, you know that it's under the license we specify. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do your own license compliance, you should, but we want to make it as easy as possible for you. So as part of that license scanning operation that we do, we recently started generating SBOMs for those projects that we're scanning. Those, I'm jumping ahead, so let me go ahead. These are the umbrella groups that are part of the Linux Foundation that we are currently scanning projects for. So many of you have heard of CNCF. There's probably about 60 or 70 projects in CNCF alone, including some really big ones like Kubernetes. So about 260, that's about 2,000 repositories, over 1 million files, and whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, about 40% of those projects I find some type of what I call a key finding or a license conflict. So it could be an Apache 2 code base that has some GPL snuck in there somewhere. It wasn't done intentionally, most likely. Somebody made a mistake. But we want to know that it's there so we can take care of that. So why are we here? We use a tool called Fossology, which is a Linux Foundation project as well. And we do source level license scanning. We've been doing that for a long time. And we more recently started doing dependency scans. Most people think of software composition analysis tools, SCA tools, and those typically scan dependencies, both direct and transitive dependencies. It's a little less common to scan source code, but it should be done, especially for license compliance. So we do both. We scan source code and we scan the dependencies. And what we're doing is we're getting all the license data, and we can also use references for the dependencies for vulnerability data. And what we're doing is we're producing SBOMs, what we are calling a unified SBOM with this combined source and dependency data. And what we'll show you in a minute is we're meeting the CISA NTIA minimum spec, but we're going way beyond that. So just a quick review of what an SBOM is. So we use SPDX. SBOMs are used to track packages and components for vulnerabilities and license compliance, among other things. Providing downstream data, data for downstream users. The good thing about an SBOM is that it uniquely and unambiguously identifies the components and their relationships to one another. That's really important, making sure that you have accurate version information and metadata. It's machine readable. We use, as I said, we use SPDX, which is a standard format. So you can see from the right, on the right there, we've got package information, we've got file information, and we have information about the relationships. So that's just sort of an overview for people who don't remember what's in an SBOM.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of SBOMs and the types of SBOMs we're producing. So many of you know I come from the SPDX community, so I've been involved in SBOMs for years. I've been kind of pushing a little bit for this project for a while, because working with Jeff, who's primarily focused on license compliance and source analysis, it's like we're this close to being able to produce SBOMs to help the security community, and way beyond that. There's a lot of use cases for SBOMs even beyond licensing and security, but you'll see when we get the different fields that we provide, we can provide a lot of information to the Linux Foundation projects. One thing I do want to kind of emphasize, though, is the type of SBOMs that we're producing is what we call a source SBOM. What that means is we're producing the information from the source code that's available at a point in time. These are typically done before a build is done, so you can take an SBOM, look at the information, and say, hey, I got a potential security vulnerability, I got a potential license conflict, maybe I'm using a component that maybe doesn't meet the supportability requirements that I have. So you can identify that before the actual build, but it has a downside in that it's not as accurate as what we call a build SBOM. So when you compare these two, of the source and the build, obviously a build SBOM is done at build time. The advantage of that is that it knows what the components that are going in. So, for example, version information. Some of the some of the package metadata will say things like, "Get me the latest version of this component." So, at the source level, we don't know what's being fetched, but the build SBOM will be able to accurately produce that. The other thing is the build SBOM actually can associate the actual build artifact itself. So you can have like a checksum on that, which you can't do on the source. We use source code SCA tools for the source, build tools, a lot of the new build environments, the latest releases for like NPM, the package manager, will actually generate an SBOM for you if you add the right little commands. And they're typically manually run for the source SBOM and typically run in a CI/CD environment for the builds. So this is just a long way of saying, really, if you're maintaining a project, you should really be using the build SBOMs, but the build SBOMs we're producing out of these projects are also quite useful, and if you don't have any SBOM, a source SBOM is better than no SBOM. So, did you want to hit the source dependency?
So, and just to follow up with what Gary mentioned is, we generate source SBOMs because a build SBOM should be done by the development team. A build SBOM would be maybe a release engineer or build engineer or developer in their CI/CD system. I'm scanning hundreds of projects, so for anybody who's done anything with a CI/CD or release system, it would be completely impossible for me to be doing that for hundreds of projects. So that's why we're doing a source SBOM. And for many of these projects, if not most of them, build SBOMs aren't being generated. We would love for them to be generated, but as Gary said, it's the next best thing. So a little bit more about source versus dependencies. So source code analysis, where we're using the tool Fossology, it's partly automated, it's partly a manual process. I won't get into the details of that right now, but you feel free to ask me later. We look at source files, snippets, code, wherever the code comes from. And of course, at the Linux Foundation, these are all open source projects. These are typically, virtually always, in your repository, say in your GitHub repo. Dependency analysis, that's third-party components and packages, both direct and transitive dependencies. Transitive is a dependency of a dependency. And as many people have said this week and for a long time, most applications, most software systems have literally hundreds and hundreds of dependencies by the time you go down. Is anybody a Node.js developer here? You know, like 800, 1,000 Node packages. So these, what we do is we scan the metadata that's in your repo, package files, for example, other files. We're looking at the metadata. We're looking at the metadata the build files that are in the repo to find the dependencies, which is exactly the same way the build system will find the dependencies when it comes to doing a build. And those are typically not in your repo. Those come from the package managers that are out there in the world. So these are two sides of the same coin. When it comes to both license compliance and vulnerability analysis, you really need to look at both source code and dependencies. Now let me mention a couple things about this briefly. When you are looking at dependencies, you're getting metadata, you're getting information from package managers. Typically the license information is pretty clear. It's in the metadata, it's specified. It's not always accurate, but it's usually pretty good. And you can use a reference to that package to go to a vulnerability database and find out if there are any CVEs, any known vulnerabilities. When it comes to source code, it's quite a bit different. When you scan source code for license compliance, you're looking for any sign of a license in the source code. Typically, it's in comments. Typically, it's license files, things like that. Those can generate a lot of false positives. Usually the results are not accurate until you've done some type of auditing and analysis, which is the manual process, but still really important to do that. Tools are getting better about that. That little quick reference card I handed out, one of the things it emphasizes is using SPDX license identifiers. Those are for source code. Those are extremely important. They'll make license compliance much more accurate and much easier and more efficient for scanning source code, because the SCA tools, almost all of them today, will look for these license identifiers. They're unique, they're unambiguous. They'll tell you exactly what your open source license is in your source code, so they're really important. Vulnerability in source code, that's a whole different ballgame. We're not talking about that today. You need specialized software to find vulnerabilities, because when you're scanning source code for vulnerabilities, you're not finding known vulnerabilities, you're not finding CVEs, you're finding unknown vulnerabilities, things that you haven't found yet in your source code. That's a completely different ballgame. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to what we call the Linux Foundation SBOM specification. Okay, say that 10 times fast. Linux Foundation SBOM specification. Okay, just once. So, this was developed by Gary and I, but because it's pretty important, we didn't stop there. Excuse me. We went out and got a group of experts to review this with us and make sure that that they were happy with this. So by the way, the slides are not currently on Sketch, but we will put them up there. So feel free to take pictures, but I will be putting a PDF on the Sketch website of this shortly after the talk. So there's 3 parts here. This is part 1, there's 3 pages. So what we've got here is a detailed listing of everything that's in our SBOM. And then on the right, we say this is something that's mentioned in the older NTIA minimum specification, which was the first government organization to say this is what needs to be, this is what should be in a minimum compliant SBOM. The next one is CISA. They've come up more recently with what they call the framing, excuse me, the framing document. The framing document is a more modern, more expansive description of SBOMs. And then the last column there, SPDX Lite, maybe a little hard to read that. I'll let Gary talk about SPDX Lite in just a moment, but because our SBOMs are in SPDX, the SPDX Lite is a variation on the SPDX standard, and so this just shows for each entry in our SBOM, each property in the SBOM, whether it's referenced by those standards. So I won't go through every single one of these, but what we've got here in part 1 are a couple of things that are at the very top level, which are called document properties and SBOM properties. It's basic information that you need to know about, say, like the creator of the SBOM and which version of SPDX are we using and some things of that sort. Part 2, these are all related to the packages. These are the components or modules, if you will, lots of different names. So these are things like the supplier of the package, the version of the package, the package URL or PURL, which is critically important to going out and finding vulnerability information. We are specifically not including vulnerabilities directly in the SBOM. Gary and I believe that that's not the right way to do it because your SBOM is a snapshot of when you did your scanning, but vulnerabilities can change, right? A new CVE could be reported 3 months later on a version of a package that you're using, and if we were including that vulnerability data directly in our SBOM, we would miss that. But 3 months later, you can use the same SBOM and you can go out and use a tool that reads the SBOM, pulls in vulnerabilities from somewhere else like the NVD, and if a new vulnerability shows up, then you'll see that. We also include things, there's the declared license and the concluded license. For packages, those are usually the same, but not always, and copyright information. And then the last part, part 3, we've got relationship information, and then we've got file information. So this is information that mostly comes from source code. So this is file by file information. So if you have many thousands of files, these SBOMs can get really, really large. Again, we're generating SBOMs that combine license data for both source and dependencies, which is, I believe that that's a bit unusual. I want everybody to do that. I want all the other tools out there to do that, but that's what we're doing. So this gives you information about individual files, which comes from the source scan. So Gary, would you go ahead and comment on SPDX Lite as well as anything else?
Yeah, I just add a couple of points. One is just to give you a little context on SPDX Lite. This came out of our Asia SPDX community, and they had a need to have like a skinny version of SBOMs that somebody who maintains a package could easily pull together. So it's kind of a minimal set, but it's enough data that they can actually do their license and security compliance. So it's a nice subset to be looking into. We wanted to make sure that what we produced was complete for that specification as well. The only other thing I would just mention is that in the identifiers that we're providing identifiers both for the package, including the package metadata, so you can, if you have something on GitHub that, that is intended for a particular architecture, you can have an identifier for that. But we also have a content identifier that will allow you to uniquely identify the actual content, because sometimes you may have the same content that's distributed through different sources with different suppliers. It's important to kind of distinguish that. And I've seen a lot of SBOMs where that, that additional information isn't presented. So that's something that we're striving to do. What we'd like to do now is just go into a little bit more what's behind the scenes on how we actually produce these, and I'll hit on a few interesting lessons because, as Jeff mentioned, we're scanning a bunch of code. So like one of the things we ran into is the performance. It actually took one of the projects, I don't remember which one, it took like 11 hours to scan and produce the SBOM, and now I think it runs in like 11 minutes. I can give you a little bit of a tip as to what we do to fix that. But at the heart of how we build this is a tool called Scaffold. This actually, I got to give credit, Steve Winslow, who worked at the Linux Foundation, left and came back, so he's still working at the Linux Foundation, wrote this tool, and I've just done some minor enhancements to support the SBOM creation. But it helps manage the source code scan. It is open source, but I'll give you the caveat, you probably don't really want to use it because it's very special purpose for the Linux Foundation needs. But if there's something you think is interesting as I describe what it does, you can certainly go into the source repo and maybe get some ideas or borrow code. It's Apache license, so feel free to use what you'd like on it. It's driven from a config file, a JSON file that describes all the project information. It basically orchestrates the scanning process. So it goes, and I'll show you the workflow. You'll see what that process that it orchestrates soon. And it currently integrates with Fossology for source scanning, and it now integrates with about 3 or 4 different tools to produce the complete SBOM. And it produces both reports and SPDX files. So the SPDX files are uploaded into a GitHub repository for all the projects, so any of you that are interested in the results can easily get it. We also provide for the projects like reports with spreadsheets and words about what the findings are, things like that as well. So that's all generated from that. Here's the tool chain we use, and those of you familiar with the CISA reference implementation for SBOM should recognize it. Everything in blue is taken directly from that. There are 2 additional steps that actually turn out to be quite important for us. The fixing up the SBOMs, and then the merging of SBOMs. The merging, as Jeff mentioned, we do the source analysis using Fossology that generates one SPDX file, and we do the dependency analysis using a number of different tools, and then the merge just brings both those together and to build one sometimes very large SPDX file that brings those 2 together. So generation is the initial generation driven a lot from the config file and scanning the code. There is the augmentation, which actually takes all the metadata out of the config file and puts it into the SPDX file. Enrichment is where we actually go out to 2 different services right now to basically look at each component and pull down additional data out of some public data sources out there. Parlay uses ecosystems.ms, and CDSBOM uses, oh my gosh, why am I? Clearly defined, thank you. Because first time I presented this, we only had Parlay, and some clearly defined people came up and kind of beat me up a little and told me I had to use that. So we're doing both now. Yeah.
Let me just mention one thing quickly, which is that when we started this project, it was really important that everything is open source. So we're not using any commercial tools. There are lots of great commercial tools out there that do these things. Many of those vendors are here in the showcase, so please support them. But we wanted to use only open source tools. What we found is that there was no single open source tool today that does everything we need, which is why we have a tool chain. And in the future, maybe there will be individual tools where there's a one-stop shop. But for now, that's why we have the tool chain. So Fossology is open source. That's the source code scanner. Trivy is open source from Aqua Security. It does a great job, but it doesn't do everything we need, which is why we have Parlay and why we have CDSBOM. So everything is open source. So
yeah, and I'll just add to that, there's a lot of great open source tools we're not using. So, if you're one of the maintainers of those, my apologies for not having you on the slide, but we just had to pick a starting point. And a lot of the decisions were driven by what some of the Linux Foundation projects were already using. So that's how we came to the conclusion. We did do kind of an analysis of a lot of different tools to make sure it met our minimum needs. But I'll just say that, when we did that analysis, we found a lot of other great tools that we could have used, but we just had to start somewhere. And this is kind of where we started. I wanted to go a little bit through the deployment architecture of how this is actually deployed, because it's important, I think, especially when it comes to the performance. So we have a Linux server hosted on AWS. It turns out it has to be a pretty beefy server to be able to scanning this much code, so it's big. Running Scaffold. Scaffold, we actually put the website that it publishes to for the reports is in an S3 bucket. The configuration file, we put that external too so that we could edit it without having to go onto the server. And then GitHub is a very important thing because a lot of the projects are hosted on GitHub. So we pull the source files down from GitHub using Scaffold, and then we push the SPDX files back up as part of that. Fossology, we have a separate server running Fossology. CDSBOM uses clearly defined, which is an external service. Parlay has its link out to ecosystems.ms. And then Trivy, which does the initial scan, this Trivy probably does the heaviest lifting of all these different tools. This is the thing that goes out and reads all the different project metadata and then tries to figure out, what the actual dependencies are. This is where we ran into a huge performance problem. This is where the 11 hours were spent. So we added in a Nexus artifact repository. And once we added that in, so what this basically was doing was caching, let's say that you're going out to the Apache Maven repository, and it gets a little tired of us hitting the server, and it starts to rate us a little bit, so we're like 30 seconds per request, and pretty soon you're at 11 hours to be able to get all the metadata. We put that artifact repository in there, and it basically caches it. I think it's like set for like 24 or 36 hours. It's not a very big cache, but it brought it down to about 11 minutes. So that was a big hit. One thing I don't have in this presentation, because I covered it in a previous presentation this week. I think it was on Monday. I can't remember the name of it, supply chain presentation where Ian and myself were presenting that. I had a lot of what I call bumps in the road for producing it. It really describes what is in that fix bucket in the supply chain. But the short summary is that a lot of these tools don't produce correct or valid SBOMs. And that's true whether it's SPDX or Cyclone DX, either one it produces. Like, for example, license expressions. Some of these tools just pull the license data out of the metadata, don't process it all, and dump it right into the file. Problem is sometimes these are not in a standard format, so they don't parse, and you'll get an invalid SPDX file. So I wrote a bunch of Python code, and you can, if you're interested, that's one interesting part of the scaffold code you may want to look at, that goes through and fixes up just about everything and puts out a valid SPDX file. And an interesting story is last night, I was preparing for the demo. I thought I better try the demo one more time, and guess what? It didn't parse validation. And I don't know if it was SBOM or Parlay. One of the two of them fixed a problem and broke it. It broke a different problem with the license expression. So I had to go in and update the fix code one more time, just so you guys didn't have to sit through the failure here.
We didn't pray to the demo gods enough.
I guess. So let me talk a little bit about what we produce in terms of the SBOM structure. It's a little different because we're doing these for Linux Foundation projects, and Linux Foundation projects don't map directly to shipping software. You'll have a project, it has lots of sub-projects, and it has lots of repos, and some of those repos ship software, some of them don't. So it gets to be a fairly complicated structure. So the way that we handle this is at the very top level, we have what we call a package, which is for the entire project. And then underneath the project, this project level package contains a package for every repository that we scan. And then once we get into the repository, we get down to the real packages that actually has metadata about some kind of a distributable software. So if you are a maintainer of one of these projects and you're interested in a specific SBOM, what you'll want to do is start at the top level and then work your way down to find the distributable one that you're interested in. But if let's say that you're in a compliance role and you want to see about the entire project, you can actually look at that top level SBOM and all the data within it to see if you find any security vulnerabilities or license issues. And then finally, you have the, what actually makes up that particular project. So that's the basic structure that we're working with. So what I'll do now is I'm going to give you a demo. I was not able to get SSH to work out of the Linux Foundation networking, so this is a recording from yesterday. And this just kind of shows, kind of hard to read, apologize for that. Just running this on a small project. I didn't speed this up. This is real time what it looks like. And what it's basically doing is just going through running each of those different projects. And when it's done, you'll see that it's going to be uploading the results up to the GitHub server. And I'm going to just jump over. Let's see if I can actually, I think I have to. I am not a PowerPoint expert, so I think I got it to stop finally. And if you go and take a look at the actual repository, oops, I think I hit it twice. you'll see that it generates 3 different files. One source, one's for the dependencies, and one is for the combined. And this is a fairly small project, so none of these are very big, but in many cases, the merged one is so big we have to compress it into some kind of an archive file to be able to upload it into GitHub. So what can you actually do with that? You know what, and then I went ahead and downloaded these files. Let's see here. And let's say I don't want to do the merged one, that's too big. If I take just the dependency one, I can actually go in and using the SPDX validator, run it through and see that if it's a valid SPDX file. And I do get some warnings in here, and basically all these warnings are the same thing. There is a GPL 3.0 license identifier, which has been replaced by GPL 3.0 only or GPL 3.0 or later. So every one of these is really just the same warning. So you get a few warnings in there, and then the other thing that you could do on the same website is look at the conformance checker, and let's see if this is compliant with the NTIA minimums, and most of it's there except for you'll find that it's missing suppliers for some of the dependencies. And this is a common issue, by the way, with these tools. And you know, to cut these tools a little bit of slack, the information on the suppliers isn't present in the metadata that's available to them, so it's almost impossible. The supplier is in there for the top level components because we know that, and it's in the metadata that we maintain. But the components, you'll find those are missing. So that's just a kind of a quick overview, and let's see if I'm able to actually start back up the PowerPoint.
I think the demo shows something that's important for the community to know, which is that SBOMs have come a long way, but there's still a ways to go. There's still, you know, when you generate an SBOM, you're dependent on the data from these package managers for the dependencies. And if the package managers don't have the data for the packages, then you can't put it in the SBOM. So there's still, we've come a long way, but we still have work to do.
Let's see. From current slide, I found it. Now we get to see my home screen again, I think, as this thing winds up. Almost there.
You got your picture there.
I know. It does that. It's my home page. That's Yosemite, by the way. My favorite place. Okay, so what can you do with these SBOMs? You know, once you get them, one of them is finding security vulnerabilities, and basically the identifier. We use package URLs as the primary key in terms of the identifiers, and you can use that to correlate them, and also for license compliance. We're running a little short on time. I do have I could do a little demo of SPDX to OSV, which will generate, it's a utility that I maintain that'll take an SPDX file and generate a list of current vulnerabilities out of the OSV database that Google and others maintain. Let's see, and then of course meet government regulations. I don't have a demo for that. So in terms of future plans, did you want to cover this, or do you want me to keep going? Go ahead.
So Gary and I have been working on this for a while, and we're not quite done. One of the things we discovered is that when you do these scans, especially for dependencies, there may be missing information. And as I said, this often comes from the package managers out there on the internet. If the data is not there, we can't put it in the SBOM. So one of the things, in addition to generating the SBOM, we also generate some slightly more human-readable reports like Excel spreadsheets that people can use to say, look at all the license information for the project. So one of the things we want to do is when things are actually missing from an SBOM, from the scan, because it wasn't there in the original data, we want to have a list of that so somebody can see what's missing, which could be helpful. We're currently generating SBOMs that are SPDX 2.3, I believe. Why is that when SPDX 3 has been out for a little while? It's because all of the software libraries that are necessary to do everything to generate the SBOM are not quite updated yet, because that's a fair amount of work. So as soon as all those libraries have been updated, we'll be supporting SPDX 3. And since we are involved with SPDX, Gary especially, who's one of the co-leads for the SPDX project, we are extremely aware of how important that is to get that done soon. And right now, we are publishing our SBOMs on GitHub, which is great because everybody can see them. And we also want to get them published on the LFX platform, which many of you are aware of, so that they're available there as well. And right now we're doing this for the approximately 260 projects out of the 1,200 or so that are hosted by LF, and we eventually want to get this done in a more automated fashion, and we want to do it for every project. So that's going to be a bit of work to get to that point, but that's our goal. So.
All right, not much time for Q&A because I know we're like close to the
5 minutes.
Oh, we got 5 minutes.
Yeah,
oh, it's 12:35.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, 4 minutes.
Yeah. Do you want to do that quick demo for the vulnerability demo real quick?
Why don't we do this in parallel? You can start asking questions, and I'll do a quick demo of the. I got 2 demos actually. See how much time I got. One is for the vulnerabilities. It's pretty simple. And then one is for the generating a notice file for license compliance.
A question right here. So do you want to handle that question, Gary?
Yeah. So I'll answer maybe a slightly different question. How the spec handles it, and I think the tools handle it the same way, is that if you're getting the same component from 2 different places, in SPDX, they're different packages. Even though they're the same content, it's the same exact binaries, they're actually 2 different packages. And that's really important because if you want to know who to go back to fix something, it might be different, between the, but excellent question though.
They happen to be the same right now.
Right, yeah, you never know, yeah. And for the demo, all I'm doing here is I'm just running, this is a Java utility, hence the very long string of to get to my jar file. But all I was doing is running the OSV to jar with input being the JSON file that I downloaded from the website and outputting to vulns.osv, and we'll see how this actually works. Ignore the logging error warnings. And this is always, live demos. We'll see if it actually works. It's going out to OSV right now and collecting the data. And all the utility really does is just parses the JSON file, puts it into the JSON format that OSV is expecting, and then pulls down the results. But let's go on to other questions. It looks like it's taking a little while.
Let's see, right here.
So you have tooling for vulnerabilities. How about on the legal side for finding encrypted licenses or compatible ones?
That's a good one for you.
Well,
automated tooling. So actually, that's my second demo. If my screen wasn't tied up doing the first demo, I'd show you right now. Actually, the one that I have is. There are some good tooling for that, but the one I was using actually came out of SBOM. They have one that'll actually generate a license notice file based on the metadata out of the SPDX file. But there are utilities. There's a nice utility that'll do license grader that will basically give you kind of a grade on how good the licensing is. It won't tell you license conflicts because tooling people tend to steer, well, open source tooling people tend to steer clear of that, but yeah. So, boy, that's taking forever to run.
Right here.
Can you say a little bit more about complying with the CRA using your tools? They mentioned it briefly, but I'm curious to know more specifically about that regulation. So the things seem to be more about like CISA.
So we are not CRA experts. There are actually some here at Open Source Summit, and there have been some talks on CRA specifically. What I can say is that my understanding of the CRA is it does require an SBOM from suppliers. So what we're doing hopefully will help comply with the CRA because we're providing an SBOM for our projects, and if you're incorporating a Linux Foundation project in your stack, then you'll have that information. I'm not sure if that helps, if that answers your question.
We really should have another column that's the CRA, but I'm pretty sure that we meet the CRA minimums in our SBOM with the one caveat that I mentioned at the very beginning, build SBOMs versus source SBOM. If the information just isn't available because we're doing it from source, you know, it won't be there for the CRA. But I think all the other fields, it should be compliant. Yeah. And if anybody knows different, please let me know. Yeah. Here's I did finally finish, so now I can actually just show you what the output is. Where did it go? Oh, wouldn't you know? Where did it go? Oh,
Let's see, more questions while Gary's checking that?
Bones? Oh, I used the wrong output. Okay. JSON. There we go. There it is. And actually, there are a few vulnerabilities in there. But this is what comes back out of the OSV database. So this is in the OSV JSON format. So just something kind of useful that you can run. And then I'll start up the. We can go ahead and ask more questions. I'll go ahead and do a quick demo of the notice file too.
Any more questions? Right here.
Probably for Gary. As part of the SPX group, are you guys doing anything specifically to motivate the tools community to get those things built out?
Yeah, boy, as much as we can, you know, and I think what we're really trying to do to help enable that is provide some of the language bindings that support SPDX, so make it easier for the developers. You know, but it's definitely, even with that, it's a bit of work. And I think the big focus right now is in the Golang code. We do have Joshua, who's right there, wrote a really nice language bindings that are fairly low level. Some people are looking for higher level utilities, and there's been some work done on that, but you know, more volunteers, you know, it's an open source project, more volunteers to help flesh that out, and definitely take a look at the language bindings that Joshua wrote to see if you can't use that already for that. Java is in pretty good shape from what I can I'm a little biased, I maintain those. But I think Java's doing okay. And then Python is pretty much the same as Go. There's like the low-level language bindings are done, but the high-level, you know, is kind of a work in progress. So any of you that are writing utilities, please take a look at SPDX, look at the repo. We have a weekly meeting every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, where the implementers get together. So you have questions or issues, it's a great place to come find answers, and we'll help you get it implemented. So as much as we can, and if you see an opportunity for us to do more, let us know, because we'd love to get more tools out there. Yeah, great question, thanks.
So we're about out of time, but Gary's going to run this one last.
Well, maybe not.
Maybe. Okay. So I'll just remind everybody, Gary and I will be at speaker office hours, which are over by the elevators and escalators. I think it's 3:45. Everybody's welcome to come ask more questions then, either about SBOMs or licenses. So thank you, everybody.
Yep, and thank you.